The difference between this team and 2 years ago, in my estimation, it's more of a team. They're playing four lines. The young guys are feeling confident and comfortable being on the team now. Paul's done a really good job with his 6 defense. I think this is as good as I've ever seen Darnell Nurse play. He's simplified his game. He's moving the puck. He's not worrying about getting 15 goals. And he's become a real strong defensive force for them. So they're a legit team this time around. They're not just relying on 29 and 97.
From Howe to Hughes, from Beliveau to Bedard, we're your source for game-worn jerseys. Go to mygray.com, MEIGRAY.com to start your collection today. Get real. Get it from iGray.
Welcome to the NHL Wraparound podcast featuring Neil Smith, President General Manager of the 1994 Stanley Cup champion New York Rangers, and longtime ESPN NHL veteran Vic Morin. Together, they share no-nonsense opinions on news and issues around the National Hockey League. Whether you're a casual or diehard fan, each episode of NHL Wraparound will leave you more informed. Now, here's your hosts, Neil and Vic.
Vic Morin and Neil Smith, and welcome to the NHL Wraparound podcast. Our studios are powered by mygray.com, your source for game-worn jerseys. And Neil, we all know how important it is to have a good first shift to start any game or any podcast for that matter. So we're going to start the show off with a couple of one-timers. What is on your mind?
Well, what's on my mind is at the bottom of the league, and that is these teams that say that they're rebuilding and they've torn the team down to the bare bones and are going through a season with a bare bones team. And I'm talking about Chicago Blackhawks and San Jose Sharks. Now, I don't know if this is the way in 2024 you rebuild a team by tearing it down to nothing. I've never seen it happen before. I've never seen teams been torn down to this level, and particularly on Chicago, where you've got this young phenom, Connor Bedard, who's going to be well known around the league for the next 20 years, hopefully. This is how he's starting his career on a bare bones team. So I've never seen this happen before, and it drives me sort of nuts, because San Jose is the same way. I mean, and they're in a small market team. Are there people actually going to the games to see San Jose Sharks this year? I haven't been out there, so I can't say, but I watch all their games, and man, I hope they're doing it the right way because they got a long way to go. I know, though, Vic, that I go down to the bottom and look up, and I think you're a guy that goes to the top and looks down.
Well, I'm going to do that in this case because what's on my mind today is all the great fodder of who the best team in the league is, who's going to make the Stanley Cup Finals, who's going to be the eventual winner of the Cup. And I'm here to say that in late January, it doesn't matter. So if we go back to the start of the season, we had Boston and Vegas with their great starts, and they were the best teams in the league. And over the course of time, we've had Colorado, Dallas, the kings of all teams. Vancouver, the Rangers, and Winnipeg are also on that list. And now, as of Monday, the 22nd of January, TSN had the Edmonton Oilers, with their historic run of wins, had them in first, the best team in the league, despite being 9th in winning percentage and 12th in total points. So for me, it doesn't matter because there are 4 things that you need to happen heading into the playoffs. You have to be playing well. You got to be healthy. You need a good draw of your opponent, and you need good old-fashioned luck. Who knows better than the Boston Bruins, who, even though they were a Brad Marchand breakaway goal with 5 seconds left to win that opening round series against Florida last year, didn't get it. Panthers come back from a 3-1 deficit, win the series, but also remember that the Panthers were the one team that played toe-to-toe with them during the regular season, weren't afraid to get into an alley fight with the Bruins, and at the end of the day, the Boston math was 65 wins, 135 points, equals so what? So everybody keep talking about who the best team is, who's going to go on to the final. But for now, just doesn't matter.
That's how we get through the regular season, though, Vic. We got to get through a long 82 games to get to that tournament at the end. And it's a whole different ball game when you get to the playoffs. You're right about that.
Well, the one team that probably has more pressure on them heading into the playoffs than any of the 32 clubs in the league is the one that manages to suck more oxygen out of the room than any other team, and that's the Toronto Maple Leafs. So for the historians out there, the Leafs last won their Stanley Cup on May 2nd, 1967. And since then, not only have they not won the Cup, they have not been to the final. And to give a little bit of perspective there, 26 of the 31 other clubs in the league have made the finals, and 20 of those clubs have won the Cup. And Neil, nobody knows about the pressure of having a long, sustained Stanley Cup drought more than you, who was the architect of the club that ended the 54-year drought in New York.
Yeah, and it's funny. I'm from Toronto. Obviously, at some point was a Toronto Maple Leafs fan when I was a kid, and I'm old enough to have watched them win that 3-2 victory against the Montreal Canadiens back in May of 67. Of course, back then we thought, well, the Leafs always win it, so they'll win it again and again and again. Of course, they've never won since. I got the job in New York and walked in the room for the press conference, and I had 50 years of baggage all around the room with me there, which I didn't even think about when I left Detroit. So it was a constant in New York, constant about the 50 years, 51 years, 52 years, 53. And finally we ended it with 54, but it was put in our face every game. And one of the Leaf management people that I was talking to about this, and why isn't it brought up more often? I said, because, it got shoved in our face every day. And he said, quite honestly, I think because it's harder to chant 1967 than it was to chant 1940, dun, 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 1940, which is what we got chanted at us everywhere we went. So it is a lot of pressure for Brendan Shanahan and the people beneath him at the current time, Brad Treveling and the coach Sheldon Keefe. And I just wonder what it'll be like in Toronto when they someday do win it, because at some point I guess they're going to. I don't think that this team is made up in a way that shows me that they can win the Stanley Cup, to be quite honest.
I wanted to hit on a couple of things regarding that, because obviously they've got some enormous contracts, and to put some scope on this, their top four forwards, so that's Auston Matthews, John Tavares, William Nylander, and Mitch Marner, are accounting for 48.5% of the salary cap for this year. And when the Matthews and Nylander extensions kick in next year, that's going to go up to 53.2% of the cap, despite the fact that the cap will be going up by $4.2 million next year. And to give this a little bit of perspective, the Edmonton Oilers, their top five forwards, Connor McDavid, Evander Kane, Leon Draisaitl, Zach Hyman, and Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, are making up only 44% of the Oilers cap this year, and it actually drops to 41.9% next year. So this is a huge problem for the front office of the Maple Leafs to try to navigate this and fill in the rest of the parts around this team to make them a contender for the Stanley Cup.
Well, but don't forget that the Leafs could do something over the summer to change that all around. And do they trade one of those guys? What do they do about Mitch Marner? John Tavares, I think, has 1 year to go after this year on his deal. And certainly, I'm sure they're going to say to him, if you want to come back, you got to take a much lower deal to get back into a Leaf uniform. So, you're right in everything you said, and they're going to have to make moves in the offseason. They have to, and they have to improve their goaltending. They are so strong in forwards, and it gets weaker as you go back towards their net. So Brad Trieveling's got his hands full this summer, I think, doing some dealing.
In your opinion, how much time does this group have left? Because I think they were a feel-good team in 2017. They made the playoffs. They took Washington to 6 games and lost that one in overtime. And everybody kind of thought they were on the up and up. But it took them 7 years to actually win one playoff series against Tampa in the opening round last year, and the entire city shut down. But then they go out in 5 against Florida, and it just doesn't feel that this group of players is going to be able to bring it home. So how long do you stick with it?
Well, I think that the first thing that you're going to see after this season, if they don't win the cup, I shouldn't say if they don't win the cup, if they don't have an impressive playoff run, is Sheldon Keefe will be in trouble. Remember that Brad Trieveling, Keefe was already there when he got the GM job last summer when Dubas went to Pittsburgh. So that's not his hire. And certainly Sheldon Keefe has been given a lot of rope to get this group to the promised land. Hasn't been able to do it, but I'm not sure that anybody could with the group they've had. They're very inconsistent during the regular season. You don't know what you're going to get from one night to the next. You don't even know if they're going to win at home most nights because they're not a team that you can depend on the result. But I think again that you're going to get one more coaching change before they start to say that this group can't do it. I think that's what's up next for the Leafs.
Is the difference for Keefe making the conference final, do you think?
I think winning 2 rounds would be a little bit of a parade down Yonge Street. They've only won 1 round in so long, and that was the big thing last year was they got to win the first round, and they did. And then they went on, and they lost to Florida, but I don't think that it was a huge negative because of that first round win. Now they've got that, and the fans want the second round one. I mean, they really want the cup, but they at least want to give them hope for the next year that you're making progress in the playoffs. They're another team that, you talked about it before with your one-timer. They're good during the regular season. They're great. They're one of the top teams the last few years. Okay, we've seen that, been there. This is their fans talking now. We want to see something come April. We want to see hockey in May. We don't want to take the ice out of the Scotia Place in April anymore. We want to keep going. So I think it's going to be interesting to see what they do this year in the playoffs. But I think Sheldon Keefe's job is completely tied to playoff success this year.
And at this time, we want to welcome Dewar to the show. Pleased to have them as part of NHL Wraparound.
And you know what I'm pleased about is that they're going to send us a free pair of jeans. I'm always in for free. And the friends of mine that have Dewar jeans back in Canada love these things. So I can't wait to get mine and see how they are and wear them all the time.
Well, I'm going to tell you a little bit about this product because Dewar makes stretch performance denim and lifestyle apparel for both men and women. Dewar's timeless styles are unlike traditional denim. They're made from natural fibers for high stretch breathability and moisture absorption, complete with temperature regulating and antimicrobial properties to feel fresh, cool, and dry. Plus, Dewar values sustainability and uses 85% plant-based materials for natural softness and comfort. So here's a special offer. Upgrade your wardrobe and order your pair of Dewar jeans today. Check Dewar's flagship stores in Los Angeles or Denver or shop online at shopdewar.com/NHL fan. Right now, our listeners can get 50% off site-wide when you use our special URL. Shop DUER shopstar.com/NHL fan. This is an awesome deal. Don't wait to get 15% off. Go now to shopdoer.com/NHL fan.
I can't wait to do it myself. I'm online every day trying to find bargains on things, and this is a great deal. So I know I got a pair coming for free, but then after that, maybe I'll use that discount. Okay, Vic, now it's my pleasure to bring in our very first guest, somebody who's well known to anybody who's ever even followed hockey, and that's Wayne Gretzky. Thanks, Wayne, for doing this on the Wraparound, our very first show. I couldn't have anybody any better, anybody that I have appreciated and admired more than you, that's for sure. But we're called the Wraparound, and I was saying to Vic before we came on the air, the only time I remember you getting a wraparound goal was in Vancouver back in 97 when you completed a hat trick against Mess and the Canucks. You remember that? That was your third goal. It was in the third period. And I don't know if you remember that one, but it's very clear to me.
I remember it. I remember for a few different reasons. One, we had just signed on a guy that was a traveling secretary, I guess, assistant to Neil and the team, Darren Blake. And for my whole career, my whole life, I've always had steak and potato on the day of a game. And that day after the morning skate, we went up to the team room to have our 12:30 meal. And as I got up to the counter, all I saw was salmon. And I turned around and I said, where's the steaks? And he said, everybody told me the best salmon in the world is in Vancouver. Order salmon. And I looked at him and I said, well, if you like your job, you better get me some steaks. I've never eaten salmon in my life on game day. So that was the start of the day. And he was all nervous. And of course, I was just kidding. But I was a night I remember I scored 3 goals and the last one was a wraparound. And now these kids, they do all these tricks and they practice it and they love it. So the kids, Nathan McKinnon, Connor McDavid, Zegras, these kids have so much skill and they practice it and they get excited about going and doing these things in front of fans and kids, and good for them. Good on them. I just wasn't comfortable doing it. I wasn't great at it. I'm not sure Mario loved it either. It was one of those things where we had nothing to gain and everything to lose by people saying, well, he can't shoot the puck that hard. He's not that accurate. He's not that fast. But I knew all that. So I wouldn't have been great in the skills, but good for these kids today that are doing it.
Well, you talk about kids, and one of the things that I wanted to bring up to you to get your impression on is obviously the greatest kid coming into the league now is Connor Bedard. And we saw him get hurt there in that New Jersey game when he came through the middle and Brendan Smith checked him legally, but ended up breaking his jaw. And it made me think about you and watching you go into Sault Ste. Marie and then watching you go into Indianapolis and Edmonton and then on into the NHL. You weren't a huge guy. I mean, you were tall, but you weren't a heavy guy by any stretch. And, I would think that you had to do something to adapt to playing against big guys, just the same way as he's going to have to. What do you think he's got to do to adapt?
Well, first of all, let me say this about Smith. First of all, it was a legal hit. He just caught him in the right spot. I don't think by any means was he trying to hurt him, but I give him so much credit for he knew that he was going to have to fight, and he didn't back away from it. He said, I knew I had to answer the bell. He showed his teammates how tough he was, how respectful of the game he is. So my hat goes off to Smith and how he handled himself after the hit. As far as I go, my first day of training camp in Indianapolis, I walked in the locker room. I was 147 pounds. And I remember standing there, and Blaine Stoughton, as I was getting dressed, looked at me and turned to one of the guys and said, "This is our savior." He's going to hurt in practice. But the guys treated me great. And, listen, I started playing at 6. I played against 10-year-olds. At 11, I played against 12-year-olds. 14, I played against 20-year-olds. 16, I was playing against 20-year-olds. So my point was I was never big. So all those years of playing against bigger competition and stronger players, bigger guys, I learned how to sort of protect myself. And when I was 14, I had a junior B coach, Gene Popeil. And in those days, Phil Esposito was the greatest center in hockey. And he would get, I think one year he had over 500 shots on goal. But he would get in the middle of that box on a power play, and nobody could move him because he was so big. And my coach said to me, go home and watch every game you can watch Bobby Clarke. And so I would watch Bobby Clarke. He played out of the corners more than behind the net. But I started playing behind the net in the corners because of Bobby Clarke. And the reason I did it was because of my size. I couldn't stand in the middle of a box. I would have been on my rear end. In those days, if you got in there, guys just knocked you over. And so that's how I started playing from behind the net, was basically copying Bobby Clarke.
Wayne, we hear the term generational player bandied about a lot more than when you were playing. And of course, in the post-expansion era, you've either seen or you have played against Bobby Orr, Guy Lafleur, Mario Lemieux, Eric Lindros, Alex Ovechkin, Connor McDavid, and Auston Matthews. And what is it that, in your definition, makes a generational player? Is it stats? Is it the physique? Is it a skill set that perhaps we've never seen before?
It's a combination of everything. I mean, obviously you got to have skill and talent. When Gordie Howe retired, we all thought, how's the game going to survive? And Bobby Orr retired, and then Guy Lafleur retired, and Mike Bossy retired. And then along came Mario Lemieux and Messier and Yzerman. And then when those guys were kind of done, everybody said, well, now what's going to happen? And along came Sidney Crosby and Ovechkin. And not only were they consistent every single year, and look at Sidney this year, he's having one of his best years, and he's 37, I believe. But they're consistent. And more importantly, they won championships. Both Crosby and Ovechkin have won a championship. And on top of that, they've been great for the NHL, and they've been incredibly wonderful in their communities, helping people who are less fortunate, being involved in helping kids that want to play the game of hockey. So I think it's not just what you do on the ice. It's a combination of what you do on the ice, becoming a Stanley Cup champion, and how you fit into the community. And those two guys have been incredible. And so as they get older, now all of a sudden we got Leon Draisaitl, we got Nathan McKinnon, we got McCarr, we got Matthews, and of course Connor McDavid. And not only are these guys great players, but they're great for the league and they're great in their communities. And let me tell you this, I never sit here and say we were better in the 80s. These kids are better than we were 40 years ago, but that's progression. 20 years from now, these kids coming in are going to be better than the guys playing today. But that's how the NHL grows, and that's how we make it bigger and better every year. I'm just very impressed by how these kids handle themselves, guys, how they play hard every single night, and how they show up to be competitive. And listen, I'm a big believer in winning the Stanley Cup is a big part of it also. And, McKinnon and McCarr have won, Sidney's won. Ovechkin's won. It would be nice to see Matthews win a Stanley Cup. It would be nice to see McDavid and Draisaitl win a Stanley Cup. That would be great for them.
Well, it's a perfect dovetail into what I wanted to ask you about next. And of course, there's the ongoing discussion about Alex Ovechkin. Will he, won't he reach your all-time mark of 894 goals? But there's another player out there whose metrics at this stage of his career are actually better. And I just marvel at the ice coverage and the diversity in goal scoring in Auston Matthews. And do you see him potentially reaching that 800 goal mark at some point?
Absolutely. And let me tell you, I remember Gordie was traveling with us when I had a chance to break his record. And I remember we were tied, and I was at dinner with my dad, and I said, in a lot of ways I feel really guilty that I'm going to break Gordie's record. And he said, you shouldn't feel that way, because he's such a classy person. He's genuinely happy for you. And then in the next breath, my dad looked at me and he said, well, you be the same class as Gordie Howe, because one day some guy's going to come along and break your record. And I remember looking at him going, oh, can I get it first? So, you know what? It's hard. It's hard to score 800 goals in the National Hockey League. But as you said, Austin's metrics, he's just been a wonderful player. And listen, it's hard to play in Toronto. He's under the microscope. It's hard for McDavid in Edmonton. I love what Pettersson and Miller are doing in Vancouver and Hughes. Those markets are hard to play in. People demand you play well every single night, and that's what Auston Matthews is doing. Shows up every game. He plays hard every night, and consequently, he's going to have a chance one day, barring injury and staying healthy. Yeah, he'll definitely have a chance.
Hey, Gretz, your old team, the team that you're probably most known for, the Edmonton Oilers, they've turned their season around, and it's been an amazing thing to watch from the beginning and that start that nobody could believe they were having to where they're playing now, which is sort of more believable because they're winning so many games. But do you think this is reality now? Is this the real Oilers, or are we somewhere in between?
I think it's a combination of a lot of things. First of all, people are kind of forgetting they won 8 in a row, then lost 3 in a row, and then I think they've won 14 in a row. So there's something like 22-3 in their last 25 games. And then if you look at the team statistically, last year they were being carried completely on their power play. This year that's not the case. They're winning a lot of 2-1 games, 3-2 games. They're winning with team defense, with some structure. My brother, who works for the Oilers, told me yesterday that in the game the other night, Derek Ryan had 20 shifts and Connor McDavid had 22 shifts. And it just shows you now they're playing more as a team. To be successful in the NHL now, you got to have 4 lines. You look at Vegas and Colorado, the last 2 winners. They played 4 lines, 6D. The game is too hard. It's too fast. It's a big man's game, and you got to have. You can't play 2 guys 26 minutes a game and expect to win. And I think that's the one thing the coach brought in. He's playing 4 lines. He's really comfortable with the 6 defensemen. I think Kenny Holland made a tremendous trade in getting Ekholm from Nashville last year. He gave him some size and a little bit of toughness and meanness back there, and defensively he's really solid. The goaltender started off a little bit shaky, but it's hard when you have that first good year as a rookie, and then the next year, everybody's expectations of you is so high. And for him, I think he was a little bit nervous at the beginning, and the team structure wasn't great the first 12 games. Since then, his goaltending with the team structure has been just tremendous. We don't hear any more talk about the Oilers trading to get a goaltender, and that just shows you the patience of a good general manager. He didn't panic at 2-9, which he could have. People were hollering to trade first-round picks for a goaltender, and he didn't do that. He stuck to his guns. He believed in his organization, and they've turned it around. They're a legitimate contender, not only to make the playoffs, but maybe to finish first in their division. Barring Vancouver breakdown, it's going to be tough, but legitimately, the way they're playing, the sky's the limit for them, and good for them. And they're a little bit older now. They've had a couple of years of playoff experience. They've gone into Calgary and beat them in a series. They know how difficult it is to win in Colorado. They beat LA, winning in LA. So, Edmonton's legit. The problem is Vancouver's legit. Colorado's legit. Dallas is strong. And look at St. Louis. They're coming on again, and they've got tremendous grit, and they got great leadership with Braden Shen. And Bennington's proven to win a Stanley Cup. They're going to be tough, too. Every team, we said it before, all you got to do is get in. The 8 teams now are so evenly matched. LA proved that by winning a Stanley Cup, finishing 8th. So all you got to do is get in.
When I wanted to ask you, a couple of years ago when Jay Woodcroft took over, they improved their defensive structure. They made the playoffs. They had a good run to the conference finals until they were swept out by the Colorado Avalanche. So this time around, there's a couple of more years of experience. And your buddy, Paul Coffey, is coaching the defense along with Chris Knobloch, the head coach. Is this sustainable to win 16 games in the playoffs once we get to the spring?
Yeah, I think, listen, the difference between this team and 2 years ago, in my estimation, it's more of a team. They're playing 4 lines. The young guys are feeling confident and comfortable being on the team now. Paul's done a really good job with his 6 defense. I think this is as good as I've ever seen Darnell Nurse play. He's simplified his game. He's moving the puck. He's not worrying about getting 15 goals. And he's become a real strong defensive force for them. So they're a legit team this time around. They're not just relying on 29 and 97. You got guys like McLeod that are playing well, Derek Ryan. And I still think there's a little bit more in the tank with Vander Kane. 2 years ago when they're in the playoffs, I thought he was their best player. And if he gets back to that sort of level, they're going to be a tough team to beat because they are playing 4 lines now and they are more structured defensively. And their goaltender is playing with confidence now.
Great. want to just wrap up my part of this. A little bit of a question here for you. The toughest task that you've ever had in hockey. Facing Mark Messier after you left the Oilers, coaching the Coyotes, or adapting to your role as an analyst with TNT?
Well, the analyst thing was kind of easy because I can talk hockey all day long, and we have a great group, and Liam is such a great host, and I've never seen a guy more professional than him. It's been fun working with Anson Carter, and of course, Henrik has been tremendous. And when I did get the phone call to work with them, my boys said to me, "Dad, you got to get Paul Bissonnette hired." And I said, "Oh, okay, why?" I go, he's unreal. And so when I called them back, they said, "Nobody knows they've already hired Paul Bissonnette." But he's just really, I always say to him, he's a showman, obviously, and he's good at it. But he knows more about the game than people know and realize. He's really intelligent. He studies it. He watches a lot of video. He watches a lot of games. And it's been a pleasure. It's been, I wouldn't say it's been easy, but it's been a transition that I've loved. Playing against Mark was really difficult. I said this before. I never got comfortable ever going back and playing in Edmonton against the Oilers. The people there for 10 years treated me like their own son. And it was really hard. I never, ever got comfortable going back there. And then coaching the Coyotes was interesting. It was a challenge because in those days, we'd have a $25 million payroll in Detroit, and other teams were at $75, $80 million. So I knew we were in a different mode and a different lifetime than the other teams. So my priority and my perspective was to try to teach these kids the game, not only the game itself, but how to be professional, how to deal with the media, how to be in the community, and how to help other people. So it was not just about, okay, I'm going to have the youngest team here and let's win a Stanley Cup. That was, in some ways a little bit unrealistic, but I wanted them to learn how to be good pros. And if I could do that, it was something that I really enjoyed.
Well, Gretz, I want to thank you for coming on the show and being our first guest. And, this show is supposed to be about hockey because that's my background. And of course, Vic comes from the world of ESPN and you're from both worlds now. And that's why we wanted to throw some TV in there. But, man, this has really been fun. It's been great. Thank you so much for giving us your time. And hopefully in the future, we can talk again.
Okay, and Neil, thank you, and Vic. Good luck to you guys on your show, and it was my pleasure to be your first guest. Loved it. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Get real, get it from My Gray. And Neil, I have to say that I have been on this site, and I am absolutely blown away by the jerseys and the collectibles that are available on this site.
I've watched My Gray grow from literally nothing to the company they are today. They're authenticators. Their stuff is all real. They go 1,000% to make sure that when they sell you something, it is the real deal. It came off the athlete. And they're really amazing. Go on their site. You'll see some stuff you've never seen before.
All right. And with that, we're going to transition to another topic. And Neil, you spent a lot of time at UBS Arena, and recently the coaching change was made with the Islanders, with Lou Lamoriello dismissing Lane Lambert and bringing in Patrick Waugh. And if ever there was an odd couple with the very buttoned down Lamoriello and pretty much an open book, hard on his sleeve kind of guy like Patrick Waugh, this is quite a pairing.
I've watched Lou's career from when he got to the Devils, many years ago, coming out of Providence College, and he's had quite a number of coaches in his years with the Devils, and then the couple of years with Toronto. They only had the one coach, which he didn't bring in, but then he's now with the Islanders, and this is his third selection of coaches. When he got there, Doug Waite was there. He was let go by Lou, and then Lou brings in Barry Trotz, fresh off of a Stanley Cup in Washington. It was a great hire, gave the club credibility right away. They did quite well in the COVID years when you think about their playoff runs. And then Barry left and is now GM of Nashville. His assistant, Lane Lambert, was made coach by Lou and now has been fired by Lou a year and a half into his tenure. And I was shocked that he hired Patrick Waugh. The reason I was shocked is I wouldn't know where that connection was between, as you say, the button-down Lou Lamoriello, been around forever, and the fiery, out of control sometimes Patrick Waugh. I mean, I haven't seen many players in my career that skate off the ice, go behind the bench, look at the team president and say, I'll never wear your uniform again. And he did that. And that was his way of getting out of Montreal and, of course, getting traded to Colorado. I think you nailed it when you said they're the odd couple. It's going to be very interesting.
Lou Lamoriello is no stranger to some impulse moves or just moves in the midst of a season. During his tenure in New Jersey, he made 19 coaching moves involving 16 different individuals, including himself, by the way. So I'm wondering here that we have a small sample size of games that we have seen thus far with the Islanders. It looks very much the same. I mean, is this move a caffeine shot for the Islanders to kind of jolt them and see if they can get into the playoffs? Because I'm having a hard time making heads or tails out of it.
Well, obviously, Lou thinks that his team is a playoff team the way it was constructed last season. He didn't do much in the offseason besides sign some of their veteran players to longer contracts. He brought in Pierre Engvall, who's not a game changer for them. They have excellent goaltending, but they didn't do much else in the offseason. So I'm sure he was disappointed in the results that Lane Lambert was getting. And I think to some extent is saying, like, I want to give this team a jolt. They're good enough to be in the playoffs. Who will give them a big jolt? Well, Patrick Waugh will definitely do that. And he is accomplishing that off the ice. Their results have been, lukewarm at best. But I do think his fiery brand of coaching style is much different than what they've had there before. So I know that at the UBS Arena, the fans, are dying for the team to make the playoffs. They snuck in last year, only I think because Pittsburgh folded at the end and lost two critical games to Chicago and Columbus. So the Islanders made it on the very last day of the season and then lost to Carolina, which was expected. But I know their fan base is very hungry for them to be in the playoffs again this year.
How important is it to create some sort of identity? Because I think that's the one thing that the Islanders have been lacking the entire season. You know, they started off and it was kind of just a dull, slow team. And then Lambert, to his credit, actually got them to open up their game a little bit. And they did have a little bit of an upward trajectory before finally failing to the point that Lambert lost his job. So is that something that was going to be able to create for them?
I would think so. I mean, everywhere that Patrick Waugh has been, including his stint as the owner-coach of Quebec Remparts, he has made an identity for those teams. His Colorado team, his first year was excellent, and then they fell off in year 2 and 3. I think he will be able to create an identity for them. It shouldn't be about the coach, and he's said that himself, but the players are the players. I mean, they have what they have there. They're not really changing. So far, I haven't seen much difference in the way the team has played. But again, your words, it's a small sample size. It certainly is. And he needs a lot more track to run on than what he's been given so far. So, he definitely will have a fiery identity, and I would imagine he'll get his team fired up as well.
Now it's time for a segment that is very special to both Neil and myself. It's the human side of the story, and it gives both Neil and I the opportunity to share some of the experiences that we have had during the course of our long careers. And today kind of has a theme of how we both got started in our respective fields.
Yeah, Vic, I think we both have great stories, and mine is very unique. I was a minor league hockey player in 1980, and I ended up taking a job in New York with a giftware company. I was in their sales. I didn't like being out of hockey at all, so when Jimmy Devellano came to town, he was able to get me a press pass to go to the Nassau Coliseum and see all the Islander games, which I was forever thankful for. And while being at Nassau Coliseum and being in the press box in the press room, I got to meet Jill Nee, who was one of the people in their PR department. I noticed that the Islanders were playing at Madison Square Garden one night, and I asked her if I could go. She got me on the press list. This is where it gets to be fun. I go up and I'm sitting near Lauren Henning in the open press box at Madison Square Garden, which was basically in the seats. There was a lot of hecklers in the blue seats at Madison Square Garden, and they started abusing Lauren Henning, the assistant coach of the Islanders, and it became a confrontation. And the security actually had to take Lauren Henning down to the locker room because it got that fiery. And a light bulb went off in my head of, geez, I could come to all the Ranger games and watch the games and give them reports. They wouldn't know that I was working for the Islanders. Lauren Henning can't go to the games. They know who he is. So Jimmy Devellano, who was the chief scout at the time of the Islanders, I asked him if he thought that might be something that they would think about. And he asked Al Arbour. And a couple days later, I'm sitting with the famous Al Arbour in a Burger King on Long Island. And he's got forms for me to fill out to go to the games. And I'm shaking in my boots because this is Al Arbour. I mean, he just won the Stanley Cup the year before. So I started going to Ranger games. I would take to Kenneog Park, their practice rink, the notes, give them to Al Arbour. He liked what I was doing. He sent me to Hartford and Boston and Washington. I wasn't getting paid anything, and I had to quit my day job because I was doing it so much. They gave me expense money, so I got by on that until I went back to Toronto for the summer. And the next year, they hired me full-time as the pro scout for $10,000. And that was my start in the NHL. I was thrilled. I had a job in the NHL. I didn't care if it was 10,000 kroner that they were paying me. I just wanted to be in the NHL. Luckily for me, after that 82 Stanley Cup by the Islanders, Jimmy Devellano got the job as GM of the Detroit Red Wings, and I was able to go with him there and get a whopping increase up to $22,000 for my first year in Detroit. So that's my story, and I've had a blessed life and been in hockey ever since, and don't feel like I've ever worked a day in my life because I've enjoyed what I'm doing ever since.
I think I was one of those blue seaters, so I hope that I wasn't one of the ones that was throwing anything at Lauren Henning, which certainly prompted you to get your start. My start really has a lineage that goes back 40 years to the day. January 30th, 1984. And I was about a year and a half out of college, and I was trying to get into either television or hockey or both. And as fate would have it, the All-Star dinner was in Jersey that year. And I was brought up in Teaneck, New Jersey. And the dinner that night was at a hotel about 2 minutes from where I lived. So at the time, I was working on some new analytical stats and wanted to see if I could hand stuff out to people that were there. And I walked in and my jaw dropped. I saw Wayne Gretzky dining with Gordie Howe and saw all the All-Stars milling about. I ran into Hall of Fame broadcaster Mike Emmerich. And right before I was about to leave, I saw writer Stan Fischler off in the corner doing interviews for Sports Channel. And I wasn't a big fan of Stan's because I was a Ranger guy, dating back to my first game in 1968, and Stan was covering for the Islanders. So I decided whether or not I should actually approach him. And fortunately, I had a moment of sanity, and I approached him and I said, Stan, I am working on some statistics which involve stats combined with playing styles, and I wondered if you'd be interested in seeing my work. And Stan never looked at me. And he just gave me his number, said, call me in a week. And I did. And a week after that, we met in New York. And by the fall of 1984, I was the first statistician doing analytical work for television broadcast, which was for Sports Channel and was for the New York Islanders as well. And I did that for 3 seasons. And I also picked up the Devils as part of some of my work. And, in the fall of 1985, I did the first of 2 books with Stan and his late wife, Shirley, called Breakaway. So if it wasn't for Stan, I would not have been able to make the jump to ESPN. And like yourself, I've had a tremendous life in hockey and in the media. And 40 years later, Stan and I stay in touch. He is living in Israel right now. And in December, ESPN just did a spectacular piece on him living in Israel while the war is going on there. So Stan, stay well, stay safe. And on behalf of so many of us that have gotten our starts through you, thank you.
Just to add on to that, Vic, I've been in New York a long time and been around hockey in New York a long time. And everybody loves Stan Fischler. Whether you're a Ranger fan, a Devil fan, an Islander fan, everybody knows Stan Fischler. Everybody reads his stuff. He's been part of the hockey scene in New York for long before we were around it. So I second everything you said about Stan Fischler. I guess we got to go now and say goodbye and thank MyGray for sponsoring us. Thanks to all our listeners. Please don't forget to subscribe. That's really important to us. We're on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you find your favorite podcasts. Join us again next Tuesday for our next show, which is when really the NHL stretch drive kicks off. So for Vic Morin and Neil Smith, thank you for being here.
Thanks for joining us on the NHL Wraparound podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to stay up to date on all the NHL action.